my mother's 40th anniversary celebration for her bakery, surrounded by 3 generations of loyal customers and the smell of her famous pecan pralines, my 14-year-old granddaughter grabbed my sleeve and whispered with shaking hands, "Grandpa, I need to show you something. Please don't react. Just walk with me." I thought she was overwhelmed. 60 people packed into Rosewood Confections on a Saturday afternoon. It was a lot for anyone, let alone a teenager. But when she pulled me into the back office and shut the door, her face wasn't overwhelmed. It was terrified. "I'm so glad you're here. What I'm about to tell you happened on a warm September afternoon in Savannah, Georgia. Let me ask you something before I go on. Where are you listening from right now? What time is it? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who's with me as I take you back to that back office, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. My mother, Evelyn, turned 71 that October, but this party wasn't for her birthday. It was for the bakery. 40 years, 4 decades of 4 a.m. wake-ups, flour-dusted aprons, and first-name relationships with half of Savannah. She'd opened Rosewood Confections the year after my father died, with $4,000 in savings and a rented storefront on Bull Street. She built it into something real, something that mattered. That afternoon, she stood behind a display counter laughing with Mrs. Fontenot, who'd been ordering her wedding cake since 1987. My mother wore her favorite blue dress, the one she saved for occasions. Her white hair was pinned up the way she always wore it for events, and her eyes, God, her eyes were lit up the way they only got when she was genuinely happy. My daughter Renata stood near the window with her husband Keith, both smiling, both holding drinks they barely touched. I'd known Renata for 46 years. I knew the difference between her real smile and her working smile. That afternoon, she was working very hard. Grandpa, my granddaughter Poppy, appeared at my arm. My sister's granddaughter technically, but she'd lived with us since she was 4 and called me Grandpa the same as anyone. She was 14, sharp as a tack, and right now her face was the color of old paper. "Come to the back, please. Poppy, it's Grandma Evelyn's party. Whatever it is," she grabbed my wrist. Not a tug, a grip. "It's about the bakery. And Grandma." I found something. The way she said it. Not dramatic. The way teenagers are dramatic. Quiet. Like she was trying very hard to hold herself steady. I followed her past the kitchen, past the walk-in refrigerator, into the small office my mother had used as her command center for 4 decades. A metal desk. A corkboard with delivery schedules pinned to it. A photo of my father on the shelf, the same one that had been there since 1994. Poppy closed the door and pulled out her phone with both hands. She'd been in here earlier looking for Grandma Evelyn's reading glasses, she told me. Found them on the desk. The laptop was open. She wasn't snooping. She just saw the screen. She handed me the phone. She'd taken photos of the laptop screen. I had to read it twice before the words made sense. It was an email chain. Renata's address at the top. The recipient was a man named Clifford Oakes. I didn't know the name then. I do now. The subject line was Rosewood Timeline / Guardianship Docs. Renata had written, "Mom still has no idea about the evaluation. Dr. Wendt is confirming Wednesday. Once we have the competency report, the transfer application moves forward." Keith's cousin at Magnolia Grove said they can have a room ready within 2 weeks of placement. Remind me, once guardianship is granted, how long before we can list the property? Clifford Oakes had replied, standard 30-day notice to creditors, Bull Street commercial property, comparable sales put it at $780K to $820K to $820. Combined with the savings account and the business valuation, you're looking at a clean 1.1 to 1.2 M total once the estate is liquidated. The guardianship filing is airtight if the doctor's report comes through. Below that, Renata again. She signed the healthcare proxy form last Tuesday. She thought it was updated insurance paperwork. She didn't read it closely. She never does with forms. I stood in my mother's office holding my granddaughter's phone and read those words 3 times. She thought it was updated insurance paperwork. She never does with forms. My daughter had sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, across from a woman who'd built something with her bare hands for 40 years, and handed her fraudulent documents. And my mother had trusted her because that's what you do with your own children. Grandpa. Poppy's voice was barely a sound. Is it what I think it is? Yes. She pressed her lips together and nodded, like she'd been hoping she was wrong. I need to make a call, I said. She caught my arm. Renata keeps looking at her watch, she said. And that man she introduced as Dad's business associate, Dr. Wendt. He just arrived. I looked through the small office window toward the front of the bakery. A man in his 60s, salt and pepper hair, the kind of careful smile that doctors learn in training. He was making his way toward my mother with a cup of coffee in one hand and a leather bag in the other. How long ago did he arrive? Maybe 5 minutes. The healthcare proxy form. If they'd obtained it last Tuesday and the doctor was here now, the timing wasn't accidental. They'd built this whole party around it. 60 people as cover. A crowd to explain any confusion my mother showed, a gathering to make it look like a celebration while they arranged her removal. I stepped into the kitchen away from the noise and called 911. This is Theodore March, I said. I'm at 447 Bull Street, Savannah. I have documentation of an ongoing financial conspiracy against my mother, who is currently at this location. There is a man present who I believe intends to conduct a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation tonight. I have photographic evidence of email correspondence explaining this. Sir, is there an immediate safety threat? They may attempt to medicate her. My daughter mentioned in the email she had something to help her relax before the evaluation. My mother is 71 years old, and she has no idea any of this is happening. Officers are being dispatched. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. Do not intervene directly and do not alert the subjects. 12 minutes. Through the kitchen window, I could see the party. My mother handing someone a slice of her coconut layer cake. Renata whispering something to Keith, both of them watching Dr. Wendt work his way toward my mother's corner of the room. Poppy appeared in the kitchen doorway. He's sitting down next to her, she said. He's talking to her like he knows her. Grandma looks confused. We go back in. We stay calm. You stay beside your grandmother and don't let anyone hand her anything to drink. Can you do that? Her jaw was set tight, but she nodded. She's stronger than I was at twice her age. Walking back through that kitchen door was one of the harder things I've done. My mother was laughing at something Dr. Wendt had said, her hand on his arm the way she touched people she liked. She trusted him because he was a doctor, because Renata had introduced him, because Evelyn Marsh trusted people. 71 years of being a good person, and she still couldn't imagine that someone would sit next to her at her own party and begin constructing the paperwork to take her freedom. Renata intercepted me near the dessert table. Dad, she touched my shoulder. Great turnout, right? Mom looks so happy. She does, I said. I kept my face where I needed it to be. Neutral, warm, nothing to see. Listen, she said, lowering her voice. Keith and I have been talking. Mom's been forgetting things lately. Little things, but they add up. We asked Dr. Wendt to do a quick wellness check tonight. Just informal. He's known the family for years. She won't even realize it's happening. It's just, she's sharp as she's ever been, I said. Dad. She smiled the way you smile at someone who's being naive. We all want to believe that. But there's a point where it's not safe for her to be alone. The bakery is a lot of responsibility. Wouldn't you rather she's fine? I smiled back. Let's not do this today. It's her party. I moved past her before she could redirect me. Across the room, Poppy had materialized beside my mother with a plate of cookies she didn't need. 14 years old, running interference like she'd done it her whole life. Dr. Wendt was asking my mother about her sleep, whether she ever woke up disoriented, whether she found herself losing track of conversations. My mother was answering cheerfully because she was cheerful, because nothing was wrong with her mind, because the man asking was a doctor and her granddaughter's father's business associate, and she had no reason in the world to think this was an ambush. "Grandma," Poppy said, "you promised to show Mrs. Fontenot how you do the praline glaze, remember? She's been asking." My mother brightened immediately. "She did? Well, come on then," she said to the room at large, pushing herself up. "Anyone who wants to see the secret—" "I don't have a secret, I'll tell you that right now." Mrs. Fontenot laughed. Poppy guided my mother toward the kitchen counter with one hand and looked back at me over her shoulder. 4 seconds of eye contact. I nodded. Dr. Wendt remained in his chair. His expression had gone from professional warmth to something flatter. He found Renata across the room and they exchanged a look I wasn't supposed to see. The bakery's landline rang. A delivery question, handled by one of my mother's long-time employees. Normal afternoon. And meanwhile, the clock in my head counted down toward 12 minutes. I stood near the front window, watching the street, watching my daughter watch Dr. Wendt, watching Poppy make her grandmother laugh about something at the demonstration counter while Keith drifted closer to the back office, where his wife's laptop sat open on the desk. I moved to intercept Keith. "Good party," I said, stepping beside him. He smiled. He's always had a salesman's smile, Keith. Easy and immediate. "Yeah, Evelyn really pulls these things together." I guided him gently with one hand on his shoulder, back toward the dessert table. Away from the office. Away from the laptop. "Thought I'd grab another one of those lemon bars," I said. He laughed and followed without thinking. People do that. Follow when you act like you know where you're going. 2 minutes later, I heard the sound I'd been listening for. Not sirens. Savannah PD doesn't always announce itself that way. It was quieter than that. The front door, the particular tone of footsteps that aren't there to eat cake. A woman in a floral blouse with a posture that belonged in a precinct moved past the gift table and positioned herself near the kitchen. A man near the back hall checked his watch and set down a cup of coffee he'd never touched. Plain clothes. They were already inside. Renata approached Dr. Wendt again, something urgent in the set of her shoulders. I watched her lean down to say something and saw his expression shift. He picked up his leather bag. They were accelerating the timeline. Renata moved toward my mother. Keith moved toward the back office door. Dr. Wendt lifted his bag. I said, "Loud enough to carry, Mom? Can I talk to you for a second?" My mother looked over. "Of course, sweetheart." Renata's head turned. "In private," I said. I took my mother's hand and led her toward the front alcove, by the window, away from Dr. Wendt, away from the kitchen door. Keith was now trying to open quietly. Poppy stepped directly into Keith's path. "Sorry," she said brightly. "Can you help me carry some boxes in from the back? The ones by the loading door?" He blinked. "What boxes?" "They're kind of heavy," she said, staring him by the sheer force of her 14-year-old certainty toward the opposite end of the hallway. I had maybe 4 minutes. "Mom," I kept my voice low and even. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me." Her face went still, in that way it always did when she knew something real was coming. "I've found documentation that Renata has been planning to apply for legal guardianship over you. She obtained a healthcare proxy form from you last Tuesday under false pretenses. The man she introduced as a business associate, Dr. Wendt, is here tonight to conduct a competency evaluation. A fraudulent one. Designed to support a guardianship filing." She looked at me for a long moment. "The insurance forms," she said quietly. "Yes." Her hand tightened on the windowsill. I watched her face move through something complicated. Shock, then grief, then something harder. "She found out I inherited money from your Aunt Carolyn, didn't she? $42,000. My aunt had died 8 months earlier. I hadn't thought about it since the funeral. That plus the bakery property, Mom. And your savings." She exhaled slowly through her nose. "She's my daughter." "I know. I brought her here." 40 years ago, I brought her to this bakery in a stroller. I know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The police? Already here." She looked toward the floral blouse woman near the kitchen. "Ah, then let me fix my hair." She patted her pin once, twice, stood up straight. The moment happened fast after that, the way these things do once they start. Renata moved toward us with the practiced concern of someone who rehearsed it. "Mom, you look tired. Dr. Wen thinks we should do a quick check, just precautionary. I've made arrangements at Magnolia Grove. It's beautiful. You'd have your own room, and Keith and I would visit." "Renata!" My mother said her daughter's name in a tone I'd heard once when Renata was 19 and had lied about something. Just her name. Nothing else. Renata stopped. "I had those forms reviewed," my mother said. After they explained it to me, she was calm. Completely calm. Evelyn Marsh, who built a business out of nothing, who'd outlasted a recession and a flood and a pandemic, who'd shown up at 4 a.m. for 40 years. She was not confused and she was not afraid. Detective Alan Moss introduced himself then. Quietly, professionally, with his badge already open. Renata's face collapsed into something I didn't recognize. Keith tried to walk toward the back office and found Officer Patricia Nguyen in his path. "Ma'am," he said, not processing for a moment that the woman in the floral blouse was a police officer. She held up her badge, and he went still. "Dr. All." Went set his bag on a chair and started to stand, and Detective Moss's partner, a young officer named Gibbs, moved to his side with a calm word and a hand signal that meant, "Stay where you are." Renata started explaining. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "We were trying to help her. She's been struggling and nobody wanted to say anything, and we were the only ones who forged health care documents," Detective Moss said. She looked at him like the words weren't connecting yet. The bakery had gone silent. 60 people stood with plates in their hands and nowhere to look. Mrs. Fontenot, who'd ordered wedding cakes here since 1987, pressed her hand over her mouth. Poppy came and stood next to me. She slipped her hand into mine without saying anything. I held on. My mother watched them lead Renata toward the door, and she didn't look away. She watched every step. She looked like someone who understood what she was seeing, and had decided she was going to see it clearly. Keith was beside Renata now, both of them speaking over each other to Detective Moss. I heard the word lawyer 3 times in the first 30 seconds. Dr. Wendt was last, walking with Officer Gibbs, his leather bag left behind on the chair. He didn't look back. The front door closed behind them. One of my mother's employees, a young woman named Bet, who'd worked Saturdays for 6 years, put down her serving tray and started crying quietly in the corner. My mother walked over and hugged her. "She's all right," she said to the room. She said it to the Bet, but she meant it for everyone. "We're going to be just fine." I've thought about that a lot in the months since, how she walked over to comfort her employee. The instinct of a woman who'd spent 4 decades taking care of things. The statement-taking took most of the evening. Detective Moss was thorough and unhurried. We sat in the Savannah Police Department until almost midnight. Poppy beside me with her knees pulled up on the chair, giving her account in the careful, precise language of a kid who'd known when she saw that laptop screen that every word she said next was going to matter. Clifford Oakes, Moss told us, was not a licensed attorney. He held a paralegal certification from 15 years prior and had been operating what amounted to a consultation service for adult children looking to establish guardianships over elderly parents. He had connections at 2 area nursing facilities, including Magnolia Grove. He'd identified and approached at least 11 families in the Savannah and Hilton Head area over 3 years. Dr. Wendt had provided competency assessments in 6 of those cases, all of them later challenged as fraudulent. 6 families, my mother said. 6. Detective Moss nodded. "We've been building this case for 8 months. Tonight gave us what we needed for the arrests. Can the others be helped? I asked. Some are already in facilities, he said. Reversing guardianship is a long legal process, but the documentation from tonight, combined with what your granddaughter preserved from that laptop, gives us significant leverage. Poppy hadn't said anything for a few minutes. She was looking at the table. My dad would have let it happen, she said quietly. If I'd been one of the other kids, I wouldn't have said anything. I probably would have believed what they told me. I put my hand on her back. You weren't one of the other kids, I said. She shook her head slowly. What about the grandmas who didn't have someone looking? She asked Moss. The ones who were already in those rooms before anybody noticed? Moss looked at her for a moment. That's exactly the right question, he said. And the answer is that they need advocates. People willing to go through the legal process to challenge the placements. My mother, who'd been sitting very still, said. Then that's what we'll do. She said it the way she said things she'd already decided. Simple, final, like telling you the pecan pralines needed another 10 minutes. The first woman we visited was named Dorothea Sims, 78 years old, a retired postal supervisor who'd managed the main Hilton Head facility for 22 years. She was in a memory care unit at Magnolia Grove, the same facility they'd planned for my mother, placed there 7 months prior by her son. She was doing the facility's activities room crossword when we arrived. In pen, her son had told the doctors she couldn't follow simple instructions, she said. He'd staged a series of incidents, moved her keys to places she couldn't find them, canceled appointments she didn't know about, and then cited the missed appointments as evidence of confusion. He'd been methodical about it. How long did it take you to understand what was happening? My mother asked her. Dorothea looked at her hands. Too long. By then the paperwork was signed and my checking account showed a new authorized user and my house was listed. She paused. I used to think it couldn't happen to me because I was educated, because I'd managed 60 employees in a federal facility. I thought I would recognize it. You recognized it, I said. After the fact, she said. After it was already done. Poppy sat across from her listening to everything. The legal process took longer than any of us wanted. Our attorney, Miriam Holt, was a legal aid lawyer who'd specialized in elder financial abuse for a decade. She was methodical and relentless, and she had seen every variation of what Clifford Oaks had constructed. Poppy built a spreadsheet. She did it on her own. Came to me one evening with a color-coded grid of all 11 cases, columns for name, placement date, assessed competency, current legal status, and what documentation existed to challenge each one. I didn't ask her to do it. She just showed up with it. She's 14, I told Miriam, the first time they met. Miriam looked at the spreadsheet and then looked at Poppy. Can you explain the color coding? Poppy explained the color coding. Miriam asked her 2 more questions and then looked at me. How many hours a week can she put in? Dorothy's freedom came first, month 3. The bank record showed systematic withdrawals. An independent evaluation confirmed what we already knew. A judge reversed the guardianship and appointed a neutral third party while permanent arrangements were made. Dorothea moved to an independent living facility of her own choosing, 12 minutes from her son's house, which she found satisfying. He doesn't visit, she told us afterward. That's fine. I'm not sure I'd opened the door. A man named Raymond Ashford, no relation to the other files, his case had been running parallel, was freed in month 5, 74. A retired engineer who'd calculated the parameters of 3 major bridges in his career. Trapped in assisted living because his daughter had convinced a court he was incapable of managing his affairs. He'd been filing handwritten complaints with the facility director monthly. They'd been noted as signs of agitation. He was calm and precise and furious in a way that had clearly been burning clean for a long time. I'm not agitated, he said when we met him. I'm correct. There's a difference. The trial date came in the spring. April 9th, Renata, Keith, Clifford Oaks, and Dr. Wend were tried together in the Chatham County Courthouse on charges including elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of legal documents, and conspiracy to commit unlawful guardianship. I didn't tell my mother she didn't have to come. I knew better than that. She wore her blue dress. The courtroom was full. Families we'd worked with over the months. Dorothea Sims, sitting in the second row with her reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Raymond Ashford in a pressed suit. Miriam Holt at the front with her files in 3 neat stacks. Poppy beside me, her hands folded in her lap. 15 now, having grown something essential in the time between. Judge Susan Crestwood presided. She was methodical and unsparing. Clifford Oakes received 22 years in federal prison. He would be 78 upon release, she noted, approximately the age of several of his victims at the time of placement. Dr. Wint lost his medical license before sentencing was announced. He received 9 years. He had, the judge said, violated the most fundamental obligation a physician holds. Keith received 6 years, eligible for parole after 4. He had not originated the plan, but he had enabled it, profited from it, and done nothing to stop it. Renata received 14 years. The judge noted the specific cruelty of a child who weaponizes a parent's trust, who sits across a kitchen table from a woman who loved her and hands her a document designed to destroy her independence. My mother sat perfectly still beside me through all of it. Renata was let out without looking back. Outside the courthouse, on the steps, my mother stood in the spring light for a moment without saying anything. Then she said, "Your Aunt Carolyn always said Renata had her father's eyes. I used to think that was a compliment. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there with her." Poppy took her hand. "Grandma Evelyn," she said, "what do you want to do with the bakery?" My mother looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's yours. It was always yours. What do you want to do with it?" My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to make it the way it was, and I want to teach you how to do the praline glaze. The real way, not the shortcut version I showed Mrs. Fontenot." Poppy laughed. "I thought there was a secret." "No secrets," my mother said. "I never had any secrets. Apparently other people had enough for all of us." We walked down the courthouse steps together, the 3 of us, into the first decent April morning Savannah had had in weeks. What I know now that I didn't know then is that it was never just about my mother. Clifford Oakes had run this system for 3 years, 11 families, and in most of those cases there was no one looking at a laptop screen at the wrong moment. No 14-year-old who grabbed a grandfather's sleeve. Those families, those grandmothers and grandfathers, waited in room with windows facing parking lots and wondered why their children stopped coming. By the time the trial concluded, we'd helped free 7 of the 11. 4 cases were still moving through courts. Miriam had taken on 2 additional attorneys. Poppy's spreadsheet had been entered into evidence in 3 separate proceedings. "She's talking about studying law, Poppy. Elder law, specifically." I told her she'd be good at it. She said she already knows that, which made me laugh the way she usually does. My mother reopened the bakery on a Monday morning in May, 40 years and 8 months after she'd first opened it. She made the pecan pralines at 4 a.m. She made the coconut layer cake. She made the lemon bars. She opened the front door at 7 a.m., and Mrs. Fontenot was already waiting on the sidewalk. I've thought about what I'd say to someone who's listening to this and wondering if it could happen to them. It could. That's the honest answer. My mother was sharp and capable and experienced and trusted. Renata was her daughter. Keith was a man she'd known for 20 years. The forms looked like forms. The doctor looked like a doctor. Everything looked like what it was supposed to look like, right up until my granddaughter saw a laptop screen and understood that what she was reading was wrong. Watch for the forms. Anything framed as insurance updates, Medicare paperwork, healthcare housekeeping. Watch for a sudden new interest from family members who want to help manage finances. Watch for someone suggesting gently that maybe you're not quite yourself lately. These aren't always warning signs. Sometimes they're genuine concern, but if they're accompanied by a stranger in a leather bag showing up at a family event and your family member's eyes meet his across the room, and both of them check their watches. Trust your instincts, and if you're a grandchild who sees something on a screen and feels the bottom drop out of your stomach, don't wait for an adult to tell you what to do. You're already doing it. If this story stays with you, share it with someone you love. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what comes next. Your attention to these stories matters. It may be the difference between someone sitting alone by a window and someone standing on a courthouse steps on an April morning, deciding what to make for breakfast. It was the difference for us. I've had a lot of time to think about what causes something like this. Not just the crime itself, but the sequence of choices that made it possible. Because nothing like what Renata and Keith planned happens all at once. It builds, one small decision at a time, each one easier than the last because the previous one went unchallenged. At some point, Renata stopped seeing my mother as a person and started seeing her as a problem to be managed. I don't know exactly when that happened. Maybe when the bakery felt like a burden instead of a legacy. Maybe when Aunt Carolyn's inheritance showed up and suddenly the math looked different. What I know is that greed doesn't announce itself. It arrives dressed as concern. It says things like, "We're only trying to help," and "She can't manage on her own anymore," until the person saying it has said it enough times that they believe it too. That's what made it so dangerous. Renata wasn't a stranger. She was someone my mother had fed and raised and loved for 46 years. And she used every bit of that trust against her. But here's what I keep coming back to. The plan failed because a 14-year-old girl looked at a laptop screen and understood immediately that what she was reading was wrong. Not legally wrong. Poppy didn't know the statutes. Morally wrong. She felt it before she could name it. And instead of talking herself out of that feeling, instead of deciding it wasn't her place or that she'd misunderstood or that adults must have reasons she didn't know about, she acted on it. She came and found me. She held her phone steady. She stood in front of Keith in that hallway and redirected him with nothing but composure and 14 years of knowing how people work. That's not something you're born with. That's something that gets built, slowly, out of being told that your instincts matter, that what you notice is worth saying out loud, that doing the right thing and doing the comfortable thing are often not the same thing, and when they diverge, you choose right. Poppy lost something that year. Her relationship with her father's side of the family was never going to be simple again. She understood that when she walked me to that office, she chose anyway, and I think about that more than anything else. The weight a 14-year-old was willing to carry, so her grandmother didn't have to sit alone in a room facing a parking lot. What Renata built through years of small dishonesties eventually collapsed under the weight of its own construction. The emails existed because she'd written them. The documents existed because she'd forged them. Every careful, methodical step she took toward that guardianship became evidence the moment Poppy took those photographs. The plan was detailed, and the plan was thorough, and the plan destroyed itself because it had to be written down, and written things can be read by anyone. My mother reopened the bakery on a Monday morning and made pecan pralines at 4 a.m. the way she'd done for 40 years. That's not a small thing. That's a woman who refused to let someone else's greed become the final chapter of her story. If you take anything from what happened to us, take this. The people who love you are paying attention even when you don't know it. And sometimes the person paying the closest attention is the youngest one in the room.